Hi, Simon. Hi, Kate. How are
Hello.
you?
Hi. Very well, thanks.
Can I ask you to introduce yourselves? Kate, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm Kate McGeevor and I'm the manager at Stretford Public Hall.
I'm Simon Borkin. I'm now, as of a few weeks ago, the chair of Stretford Public Hall.
And what were you doing before? Are you full-time on Stretford Public Hall at the moment? Or
Yeah, so I'm full-time and I've been at the hall for about 5 years now. Over 5 years, I think.
Okay. What were you doing before?
I was the manager of a farm.
Okay.
So I was working on a farm.
Quite different.
Well, maybe similar.
How about you, Simon?
So I got involved in 2016, which was just as the Friends group had negotiated the transfer of the hall from the council into community ownership. So the chair at the time, Anushka Dayton, basically I got involved through my day job, which I worked at Cooperatives UK, which is sort of trade body for co-ops, and Stretford Public Hall. Got involved in a government program called Community Economic Development, and it was basically looking at how communities could have a greater stake in how neighbourhoods and localities could, stimulate economic development. And I came to the hall not knowing much, and then met Anushka and met Dan, another founding member, and Lisa. And then Anushka approached me and said, "Hey, do you want to come and join the board?" And I sort of said, sounds quite interesting. And yeah, that's like 7 years now. So
7 years.
Yeah.
And you don't just do that. You've got other responsibilities as well, or you freelance for
so I suppose
bodies.
We're the organisation. So Friends of Stretford Public Hall is what's called a charitable community benefit society, which is essentially like a member-owned charity. So I'm a trustee, and typical of a charity, the trustees, it's a voluntary role. So I suppose I've always predominantly worked with the hall in a voluntary basis, albeit I did spend a small amount of time. I came off the board and was a sort of project organizer at the very start of the ballroom transformation. But my day job is a nice kind of complement that I work with other communities and co-ops around doing similar projects. So it's very, I suppose, mutually beneficial in that I can draw a lot on experience at the hall to help other groups, and equally I get experience what other organisations are doing and hopefully bring it to the hall.
It's pretty good experience. So because this episode is on Stretford Public Hall, how it was renovated at the moment, how it's run, and what's the future of the hall. I've got a small game about Stretford and Stretford Hall. So there's 5 questions. There's nothing to win yet, but maybe for future episodes there will be something to win. But do you know who was at the origin of Stretford Hall? And when was it built?
It's not a trick question, so I presume it's John Rylands.
So John and then Ricketta.
Yes.
And Ricketta Rylands.
Yeah.
And
the date is not an absolute consensus on.
Because we were told it was on our website or something, and then we were told it was wrong. Was it 1879?
Yeah, so I think based on records I've seen, 1878 or 1879. So it'll be interesting to know what date you've got there.
Well, the date I've got is 1878.
1878, okay.
And obviously, there's John Rylands it was quite interesting when I did that research. He was quite a rich man, like working in textile, and he had 15,000 people working for him with 17 mills and factories, and was producing 35 tons of cloth a day, which I think was quite interesting to know, especially about John Rylands. And there's a library as well that was built by his wife when he died.
He was Manchester's first millionaire.
Was he?
Yeah.
There you go. I didn't know that.
And he lived over not far from here in Longford Hall, which was in Longford Park.
So Stretford used to be an agricultural village in the 19th century, but it wasn't called Stretford Do you know what it was called before?
Well, I know it was a lot of pig farming around here. Pighampton, I've heard a term.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Porkhampton.
Porkhampton.
Because, there was a lot of pigs raised and produced here. What's the population of Stretford? And that's the data from 2011. And obviously I've got ranges for you to help you.
Okay. It's multiple choice.
35,000 and 40,000, 45,000 and 50,000, and 55,000 and 60,000.
Okay.
I thought it was 39,000, so I think first.
I think, yeah.
So
It's the first option.
It's 46,000.
Oh.
46,000.
Close to 47.
Okay.
There may be also tricks in some questions, but which building or facility is not part of Stretford? Manchester United's football ground, Lancashire County Cricket Club ground, or the Imperial War Museum near the Media City?
I mean, I imagine the Imperial War Museum is more Salford. That would be my guess.
Well, they're all in Stretford.
They're all in Stretford.
Didn't know
And
that.
I didn't realise also Old Trafford is part of Stretford.
Yeah.
It's not outside of Stretford. And during the Second World War, Rolls-Royce Merlin engines were produced in Trafford Park, which is part of Stretford, and it's the world's first industrial estate, apparently. These engines were powering two famous aircrafts. What are these two aircrafts?
Famous aircraft.
Yeah, I was going to say like a Spitfire or something.
I've got to say, aviation isn't my strong point.
Yeah, it's okay. They're very well known. I mean, I know I'm pretty sure you've heard those names.
Put us out of our misery.
The Spitfire.
Oh, yes. Spitfire. Okay.
And the Lancaster.
Lancaster bomber.
Bomber.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
So, about the Stretford Hall, can you tell us how it all started from the renovation idea, why you wanted to do it, and how you raised money? Don't know who's the best person to start.
Okay, yeah, I'll do my best to give you the short plotted history. So obviously we've covered the hall's been 1878. The hall was opened, and at that time it was very much Stretford Public Hall. It was built for the purposes of the community. I mean, I'm sure Kate will be able to come in terms of some of the uses over time, but it had really mixed offer over the years. Initially it had a library, swimming baths. I'm trying to think of other uses. I mean, obviously this ballroom that we're sat in was used for all sorts of events and community activities. And then essentially it was when Enriqueta passed, it moved to the council basically became the custodian of the building. And I suppose the next kind of notable, change was when it became Stretford Civic Theatre, which I'm going to say was in...
Post-war.
Yeah,
49, I think.
49. So actually quite a lot of residents who've lived in Stretford will know it as the Civic, because that was its primary it was primarily a theatre.
Mm-hmm.
And then essentially it was in the 90s where I think the council, it was basically, it was difficult for it to carry on as a civic theatre, was my understanding. So the council basically took it on and it became sort of de facto council offices actually it might have been a bit earlier, but so it was essentially, even in this ballroom, you had it was used as office space, which is quite bizarre, really.
Yeah.
And it was around 2012, 2013, I think the council recognised that actually they didn't see a future for them using it as a council space. And I think that they basically started to test out alternative uses and see if there was interest. In that I don't think they had any, grand plan, but they realised, and it was at that point that actually the community. Well, it was actually the founding members, Anushka, Dan, and Lisa, initially spearheaded a kind of a campaign to say, actually, because it was starting to come out in the public domain that the council were looking at alternative uses of the building, and they basically saw how fantastic the space was, and that actually what Stretford really lacked was a kind of central civic space, community space. Obviously, we have the mall over the road, but there's no natural district centre.
Yeah.
So essentially, they started to build a campaign around pushing for bringing the hall back into community use.
When was it?
So that would have been about 2013, 2014.
Okay.
And it was an interesting time because actually it was about that time that the Localism Act had been passed, which was basically giving communities greater powers to take ownership of assets.
Okay.
So there was essentially a bit of legislation called the Community Asset Transfer, which gave councils the ability to basically transfer assets at sub-market value to communities. So it was sort of good timing in a way, because there was a bit of energy and interest in the idea of communities taking on assets, and there was a bit of funding as well. So,
do you know how much was available as a funding?
Well, I mean, I think it was, in a way, it was relatively generous funding, given current circumstances, if you compare it to now. But so I think I know the Friends group basically were able to draw on, I think, maybe around £50,000 for all the professional services that they needed to put a convincing bid together to the council. So architects, accountants, legal. So that was really critical, because actually I think there was interest at the council I think they saw the value of a community asset transfer, but obviously the community need to put together a convincing case. And obviously you need some expertise to help do that. Yeah. But it was very much driven through the community. They did some fantastic work just building a supporter base. I think they had got 2,500 people signed up to a mailing list. And they did some crowdfunding. And then the council said, well, we're going to invite bids. Mm-hmm. So the community basically put a bid in. I think it needed to be in on the 23rd of December, 2014, I think. So I think it was I think it was a bit of a kind of pressure, getting a bid together amongst the community just the 2 days before Christmas. Yeah. But they managed it, and the council basically agreed to the asset transfer based on that bid, and then actually sold the building to the community. When you say the community, was it like a charity? Or yeah, so it was... How does that work? Does the community have to set up a charity together and say, we represent the Stretford community, and therefore they can apply for grants and say, we've got the plans of renovating Stretford Hall? Yeah, exactly. It was... So that initial funding, some of that was to basically help work out what was the best legal model. Yeah. And actually that was where it was quite interesting, because initially it was set up as a charitable company just to get going. It was quite quick, just needed an entity just to be able to raise a bit of funding. Mm-hmm. But it was during that time it was recognised that actually the whole business plan kind of was underpinned by the idea that we'd have to raise money from the community to invest. The building wasn't in the worst condition, but it definitely needed investment to realise what we wanted to do to turn it into an active community hub. So it was at that point that we recognised that there was this quite valuable legal model called a community benefit society. It's a type of cooperative, but essentially allows community members to take a demo. So every member of Stretford Public Hall is one member, one vote. So the community that become members. So we do co-own it together, and we can all participate as a member, and we'll come on to it. But essentially, the community were able to invest. So that was quite a key part of the identity of what we were doing here. So actually, the council's we bought it for £10, but the investment needed was obviously much more. And then basically, the most powerful thing we could do is actually allow the community to invest, because it allowed the community to take a stake in the organisation, and it then convinced other funders that actually people really want this. I think it's a really powerful way to say, if people are willing to put £100 in, it's really powerful to say this is something that the community are really getting behind. So it was I think it was a really important first step along the way.
So is that what happened? They put £100. Most people put that much money. Do you remember do you have statistics?
I do sadly have all the statistics of the share offer
Great.
in my head, despite it being about 5 years ago. So when we basically convinced the council that we could run this space as a really active community cultural hub, we basically said that a main part of that was to renovate the ballroom that we're sitting in now, because actually this is, as you can see and hopefully hear from the ambience, it's a great, significant space. There's nowhere else in Stretford that you've got this kind
definitely.
of... So we always said that we were going to raise money from the community to basically transform the ballroom, because there were a number of issues around the condition and the offer. We couldn't realise the potential of the ballroom until we invested in it. So we basically went and did the share offer in 2017, and we launched it on the 2nd of February, and we were aiming to raise £250,000, which is quite scary.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah. And we sort of knew that there was enough interest and energy, but you'd never quite know whether people were really going to go for it. We were quite fortunate because we got some match funding. So for every £1 the community put in, a funder called Power to Change would match up to 100,000. So that definitely helped.
Yeah.
But in the end, we actually raised 255,000.
That's great.
From about 800 members, and we said with the minimum was £100. So it's not nothing. It's quite we were really amazed that probably about 2/3 of our investors put in 100, and then we got a few slightly larger amounts, and the majority came from local. So it was predominantly local investors. About 80% were from Stretford.
That's quite impressive, 80%. Were you involved at that time, Kate?
No, that was before I joined.
It's just was it just after the funds were raised, or?
I joined in 2018. Yeah, so the following year.
And so it's at which time did you start? You started to raise money, you got the money, but did you put some plans to show people what you were going to do and say what they're going to invest in?
Exactly.
A bit like Stretford Mall, I guess.
So I think the big learning for us was with a building like a heritage building, you can obviously do a certain amount of feasibility to understand. Like, we had some headline plans about what we were going to do, but we were keen to raise the money. So we knew that we were going to obviously have to do some more detailed investigation to actually really finalise the work. And essentially, we raised £255,000, which was a fantastic achievement. But if I'm brutally honest, we didn't entirely know whether that amount of money could enable us to do the work that we needed, because we couldn't do the level of exploratory work around structures. There's so many variables. And it was actually really only until Kate came in that we had someone who could really dedicate their time to unpick but what was really valuable is that we could bring in other funding from other funders, because we could say, look, because the funders could see that we were doing something that was really going to generate community benefit. We had 800 members that were all wanting this.
And so which funders did you attract, or did you convince, and how much did you raise after? Were you able to raise some money after, presumably?
Yeah, we did. We raised, so Power to Change, the community business fund, we had almost 300,000 from them in addition. And then we had another 70 from Viridor. And Veolia.
Yeah.
So we did, it was about another 400,000 we had.